Hey, I'm Shelby Hartman, DoubleBlind's co-founder and editor-in-chief, and today I'm going to tell you the story about a psychedelic retreat center that has been in a flurry of controversy called Sawillow. So I'm just going to provide a little bit of a disclaimer before we get into this video, which is that this is an investigation into a psychedelic retreat center that was operating out of integrity and run by a facilitator that caused a lot of harm. So if that's material that might be upsetting to you in any way, then you might want to just skip to the next video. First, I just want to remind you to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button if you never want to miss a beat from us. I'd also like to mention our brand spanking new newsletter called The Drop-In. We have put so much care into this, and if you're interested in psychedelic news, advice for how to embark on a journey with psychedelics, it comes out twice per week. It's free, and you can subscribe by following the link in the description of this video. Okay, so before we get into the story, I just want to say that if you didn't know, DoubleBlind reports all kinds of features. We actually began as a print magazine, and we do investigative reporting and profiles on interesting characters within the psychedelic space. And so this YouTube channel, primarily from the beginning, for the last 5 years, has been dedicated to me offering advice via the experts that work with DoubleBlind on how to embark on a journey with psychedelics. But recently we decided, oh my gosh, we do all these amazing stories and features, why not share some of those with our YouTube community as well? So this particular story comes from an investigative piece written by the incredible journalist Jules. And if you are a subscriber to our YouTube and you love hearing these kinds of stories, then be sure to let us know so that we can make more videos like this. Okay, so now on to the story. Julia was a British psychotherapist in her 40s who has been exploring and working with psychedelics for about 8 years. In 2022, she read glowing reviews about a psychedelic retreat center in Mexico called Sawillow. She and her friend, who's a psychotherapist, signed up for a 17-day Bufo facilitator training course for $5,000. For folks who don't know, Bufo refers to a certain species of toad, the Bufo alvarius, or sometimes called Incilius alvarius toad, or Sonoran desert toad. And it's known because 5-MeO-DMT, which is, some people say, is one of the strongest psychedelics known to man, can be extracted from this toad. So Sawillow was based at a beautiful farmhouse outside Mérida in Yucatan, Mexico, and it was run by a Frenchman named Bruno Cluzel, who calls himself Gabriel, and his wife, Imeline. They lived there with their 3 children. They offered Bufo ceremonies that cost a few $100s and multi-week facilitator trainings for thousands of dollars. Some people found healing from substance dependence and other issues, ultimately choosing to stay at the retreat and become employees. Julia and her friend told Jules that from the start, she just had bad vibes when she got to Sawillow. When they got there, Gabrielle was mid-ceremony. She said he eyed them strangely and muttered what sounded like incantations and then produced startlingly accurate information about them. She told us it was weird, there were all these red flags, yet for some reason we stayed. Now I'm going to stop there for a moment before I continue the story and just say that part of why we tell these stories is not just because we want to hold specific retreat centers or facilitators accountable for causing harm, but also because we think it's really important for people who are embarking on a journey with psychedelics to understand that, unfortunately, even though psychedelics have shown incredible therapeutic potential, and many people have reported to have life-changing experiences on them, found purpose in their lives, spiritual significance, all the things, right? That also, because the psychedelic industry and movement has been underground for so long and hasn't been regulated, there have also been many facilitators and retreat centers that are operating out of integrity. And so we actually have a guide on how to vet your facilitator on the DoubleBlind website. if you're thinking of sitting with someone underground or going to a retreat center. But just like the first thing I want to say as a disclaimer is if you feel weird around like the retreat center or the facilitator, like listen to that feeling, right? Because when you're on a psychedelic, what happens is that what you're already feeling oftentimes becomes amplified. And the most important thing to feel when you are on a psychedelic is that you are in a container, in an environment where you feel safe and where you feel comfortable, so that whatever comes to the surface, you feel like you can address it, you can process it, you can move through it. Yeah, I mean, even if the person isn't working way out of integrity and necessarily going to do something that, would explicitly violate codes of ethics, if you just don't feel good around them, don't do a psychedelic with them. Don't train with them. Wait until you find someone who feels right. Anyway, Sowilo began each day with what Gabrielle said was a low dose of 5-MeO DMT, which actually wasn't small by any normal metric, also a red flag. Then there would be an even higher dose in the afternoon, or sometimes a magic mushroom or Syrian rue ceremony. Syrian rue, for those of you who don't know, sometimes referred to as the ayahuasca of the Middle East. It's a DMT-containing plant. Julia noticed Gabrielle was smoking a lot of bufo, causing him to sometimes fall over. Again, red flag, right? I'm not going to say red flag that the facilitator is doing psychedelics, because in an indigenous context, it's very common for the curandero, the facilitator, to partake in the plant medicines with the people in the ceremony. So, if you go and sit, like, for example, with the Shipibo in the Amazon and you drink ayahuasca, the facilitators probably will be drinking a little bit of ayahuasca as well. But certainly, they need to be like firm. They need to be standing, certainly able to stand, sit up, and give you their undivided attention. If they are displaying any signs that they're like, tripping and in another dimension and incapable of kind of containing themselves, then they definitely shouldn't be holding space for other people. Guests fell over to burning themselves with the pipe or banging their heads on the ground, and the facilitators offered combo and bufo on the same days. One time, Gabrielle forcefully grabbed Julia's head and without consent, which again, obviously big red flag, put drops of sananga into her eyes. And for those of you who don't know, sananga is made from a shrub found in Latin America, and it basically elicits a deep burning sensation in the eyes. It's sometimes offered after ceremony, like after combo, the facilitator might offer drops of sananga. It's a pretty intense experience, and it's one that, you need to fully understand what it is that you're getting yourself into and consent to. All psychedelics, but sananga is very intense. So Julia told Jules, honestly, it felt like blood was pouring down my face, and he was so rough. There was no permission, and it just felt abusive. While Julia had previously had positive psychedelic experiences, her experiences she described as hellish at Sowilo. She said, with every bufo session, I was catapulted into an utterly terrifying dark place. Gabrielle said the darkness was in me and my fault. He said I was a witch and needed to give up my black witch ways and that I hid from him in the medicine. He said every session I went into hell. He came and saved me to bring me back. Gabrielle was an odd mixture of a guru with messianic pretensions and a former Miami real estate salesman with slicked back hair who often spoke about money and how successful he was in his previous job. Okay, I'm gonna stop the story again for a moment and just chime in here and say, obviously Gabrielle is a pretty extreme version of what it looks like for a facilitator to be out of integrity, but this is an important story because a lot of what he's doing, problematic figures in the psychedelic space have done in more subtle ways and are red flags. So again, firstly, be wary of anyone making you promises, right? And that includes in marketing materials on psychedelic retreat center websites. You'll see things like, my life was changed, or have your life transformed overnight, or, we talk about this a lot on this YouTube channel and in articles on DoubleBlind, but Like, yes, it's true that sometimes people have psychedelic experiences that, one psychedelic experience that it feels like profoundly changes their life for the better. But oftentimes, psychedelics are a lifelong journey for people, and they're not a panacea, and they don't heal everyone's problems overnight. And, even if you have a lot of really powerful sort of revelations about your life, then there's this whole period afterwards, right? That's called integration, where you have to actually do the work of incorporating those realizations into your life, sometimes with the support of a psychedelic integration therapist. So this is just to say, like, any kind of promises of your life is going to change overnight, red flag. Also, any kind of sort of messianic guru vibes, like people, facilitators saying things like I'm gonna save you, or I'm reaching into your visions and interpreting them for you, or I'm telling you about yourself. It's like, if you are working with certain indigenous lineages, then, it depends on what you believe, but I believe that certain people are trained to work with the energies and spirits of the plants, and it's more of a sort of like actively engaged experience. They're not just like sitting there holding the space the way that sort of like a Western therapist or facilitator might. But it's a relationship with the plant and with the fungi, and one that's steeped in reverence. It's not, I am saving you, I'm a guru, I'm a god, I understand your visions. And actually, to the contrary, we've talked about this on DoubleBlind. There's this concept of, what do they call it when someone has like a break on psychedelics? It's not psychosis. It kind of appears like psychosis. I'm blanking on it right now, but basically, like, there are times when people do psychedelics and they actually kind of enter into a state of delusion, and someone saying that they are God or Jesus or a chosen one, or any kind of language that puts them on a pedestal as some kind of divine figure, is actually a sign that that person is delusional and needs support, professional support. So anyway, back to the story. Gabriel told Julia he was a walk-in spirit called Gabriel, which is his middle name, and sometimes that he was Lucifer. From the first Bufo session, Julia felt in a state of permanent terror, and one day they were served samadhi, or Syrian rue, seeds, and Julia could hear Gabriel whispering to his assistant, "Make sure she drinks it all." Again, obviously a red flag. Dosage should be an ongoing conversation with the facilitator. Gabriel lied next to her during the ceremony and said, "You're so boring, you're such a victim." He also tried to get her friend to mock her for being pathetic, and she said that she felt like Gabrielle was trying to break her spirit. Then there's Summer, a 47-year-old hypnotherapist and shaman with a traumatic childhood. She went to Sewillow in March 2023 for a 17-day practitioner training for just under $5,000. When she arrived, Gabrielle seemed to be against her. "I have COVID vaccines, and apparently vaccines put Gabriel into a state of extreme aggression," Summer said. Anytime he smoked Bufo, which was a lot, all day long, he would walk around in circles, and if he was near you and you happened to be vaccinated, he stared at you and started yelling. "What's my name?" If you didn't say Jesus, he would get more and more aggressive. Then later, his followers would come up and say, "Did you get vaccinated? How many times?" And then Gabrielle would start drilling you. "Why did you get vaccinated? Why?" One night, Summer took 4 grams of mushrooms, and she went to some dark places from her childhood. She said, "While I'm there, Gabrielle starts yelling at me about how I'm supposed to see him as Jesus. Then he brings over these 2 chairs, and he and his disciple JP sit above me and just start peppering me with information about how he's Jesus and we're all here to serve them and support them as they heal people." The psilocybin eventually wore off to the extent I could tell them to stop yelling at me, and then they wanted to give me 4 more grams. They were getting ready to shove it down my throat, and I thought, I'm gonna have to physically fight, and I was trying to assess how strong I felt. And then eventually I became docile about seeing him as Jesus, so he said, okay, you don't need any more medicine. While Gabriel, his staff, and guests were undergoing these extreme experiences, his 3 children were wandering around the retreat center, supposedly being homeschooled, but in Greg's mind, not receiving much in the way of proper education. Needless to say, many clients at Sewillow had extremely adverse experiences: psychosis, hellish trips, spirit possession, and people running off into the night. Jules interviewed 2 people who said they arrived at Sewillow in good health and felt suicidal within days. For Julia, her departure did not mark the end of this whole ordeal. She endured weeks of recovery, plagued by severe physical and mental after effects, which highlights the potential dangers of unregulated psychedelic practices. Similar experiences from other people who attended paint a broader picture of Gabriel's harmful approach, using his self-proclaimed spiritual authority to justify abusive behaviors. Further investigations revealed more disturbing details about the retreat's operations. Negative reviews began surfacing online, with former participants detailing their traumatic experiences and questioning Gabriel's qualifications and intentions. The retreat's reputation suffered, of course, leading to increased scrutiny and eventually a safety review by Retreat Guru, which resulted in Sewillow being delisted. The narrative around Sewillow serves as a cautionary tale about the dark side of the burgeoning psychedelic therapy movement. It underscores the importance of regulation, proper training, ethical standards to protect individuals seeking healing. And I just want to say that part of why we tell these stories on DoubleBlind is because a lot of people think that, we're a pro-psychedelics organization. And yes, it's true that we put out a lot of videos and articles that are intended to support people on their journey with psychedelics, but at our core, we're actually a journalistic entity. I'm a journalist by training. We have a print magazine that we put out twice a year. And a big part of our why at DoubleBlind, my why for starting DoubleBlind, is not just talking about the positive potential of psychedelics, but also really helping people to understand the full scope of what's happening within the burgeoning psychedelic movement. And that includes harm, and that includes being honest about the ways in which psychedelics might help you in your life and the ways that they might harm you, especially if you don't do them in the proper set and setting, right? So, unfortunately, like I said before, this story, it's an extreme version of causing harm, but, there have been some really dark, sticky, icky things happening in the psychedelic movement for a long time. And so, one of the risks of this moment in psychedelics is that more and more people are becoming interested in trying them for the first time or coming back to them for mental health, and they don't really know where to look, and they just start Googling online like psychedelic retreats and things like that. And unfortunately, a lot of these psychedelic retreat centers that have caused harm also, were fairly well capitalized in the beginning. And some of them were started by, entrepreneurs coming from other industries and things who understand marketing and understand how to create, YouTube videos and a social media presence and kind of cherry pick testimonials from people that had positive experiences, or even make up testimonials. So just because you go on a website and it's like, there's 12 people saying that they had life-changing experiences and the website is well designed and it looks like it's a beautiful retreat center with a pool and massage therapists, doesn't mean that it's safe. And the number one thing that we always say at DoubleBlind is, if you're looking for someone to sit with, whether you're going to a legal retreat center, you're sitting with someone underground, make sure, if you can, that you're getting a referral from someone that you trust, who has been there and who has sat with them before. And if you don't know anyone, then ask if they can connect you, with people. And again, check out DoubleBlind's guide on all the questions that you should be asking, because, they should not you basically want to think about going to a psychedelic retreat as having psychological surgery, right? Like they're going to be through these medicines, opening up parts of your unconscious, and you're going to be potentially, depending on the dose, in a real state of vulnerability. And so think about it the same way you would think about getting physical surgery, right? You're not just gonna go to any doctor. You're gonna make sure you're really gonna do your homework, and you're gonna go to someone who's willing to take the time to look at your medical history, look at your psychological history, talk to you about your concerns, answer all of your questions. You know, you should be able to talk to a real human being that's affiliated with the retreat center who makes you feel cared for and is willing to answer all of your questions. Anyway, grateful to people like Jules Evans and other journalists who are doing amazing reporting to try and hold stakeholders accountable within the psychedelic industry. As mentioned, we do publish these investigations and put them out in our newsletter, which comes out twice a week and is free. It's called The Drop-In, and there's gonna be a link to that in the description of this video. And if you wanna check out all of our reporting and journalism, you can visit doubleblindmag.com.